Imagine standing in a mansion so big it takes 5 minutes just to walk from the front door to the kitchen. Marble floors, priceless art hanging on the walls, a phone line reserved for world leaders. You're not just rich, you're the richest person alive. Sounds like the ultimate dream, right? Now picture that same man, pacing those endless hallways completely alone, paranoid that everyone around him just wants a piece of his fortune. That man was John Paul Getty. And when his grandson was kidnapped, Getty, with billions in his pocket, refused to pay the ransom at first. Not because he didn't have the money, but because he was convinced it was some kind of scheme against him. The richest man in the world, but in that moment, he was broke in every way that actually mattered. We grow up believing money equals happiness. Work harder, climb the ladder, cash the paycheck, and one day you'll make it. That's the American dream. Buy the house, park the shiny car in the driveway, and finally feel like you've won the game of life. But here's the kicker. Once people hit those milestones, the happiness spike doesn't last. That glow from the new car, the bigger house, the bonus check, it fades. And then you want more. Always more. This is the trap psychologists call hedonic adaptation. And it's the reason billionaires can feel as empty as someone struggling to make rent. Our brains are wired to get used to things. The rush of excitement from something new shoots up like fireworks, but the show doesn't last. Soon the new becomes normal, and normal becomes boring. One study compared lottery winners with accident victims who had lost the use of their legs. A year later, their reported levels of happiness weren't all that different. Let that sink in, a jackpot and a tragedy, and somehow both roads lead back to the same emotional baseline. This is where the American dream starts to look more like a mirage. For decades, TV commercials and glossy magazines sold us the idea that success equals joy. Buy this car and feel alive. Get this mortgage and your family will thrive. People internalize the script. Happiness is for sale, and the currency is hard work plus consumerism. But here's the problem. Millions of Americans bought into it, and many still feel hollow. They clock in 60-hour work weeks, chase promotions, stretch themselves thin for a bigger house in the suburbs, and lie awake at night wondering why they're still anxious and unsatisfied. It's the hamster wheel effect. You're running hard, but you're not getting anywhere. And Getty isn't some relic of the past. Look at Elon Musk, a man who launches rockets, builds electric cars, and tops the list of the wealthiest humans in history. From the outside, his life looks like the definition of winning. But scroll through his own words on Twitter, and you'll find confessions of exhaustion, loneliness, and nights filled with pain instead of peace. At the very height of financial power, he admits he feels broken. That's not the script we were promised. If money buys happiness, why does the man with more money than entire countries sound like he's searching for something he can't find? Psychologists have an answer: comparison. We don't measure ourselves by what we actually have. We measure against what we see around us. Your neighbor pulls into the driveway with a brand new truck. Suddenly your car feels outdated. A coworker posts vacation pics from Hawaii. Suddenly your week at home feels wasted. It doesn't matter if you're making 50 grand or 50 million. The game is the same. There's always someone ahead of you. And that means the finish line keeps moving. You never actually arrive. Data backs this up. Nobel Prize winning researchers Daniel Kahneman and Angus Deaton studied the link between income and happiness at Princeton. Their results? Money does help, up to a point. When you're struggling to cover basics like food, rent, or safety, every extra dollar feels like relief. But beyond a certain threshold, around $75,000 a year in the U.S., the curve flattens. More money after that doesn't deliver more happiness. You can double, triple, multiply your income, but your emotional well-being barely moves. Think about that. A millionaire isn't necessarily happier than someone earning a comfortable middle-class income. After survival is secure, happiness isn't about money anymore. The American dream, then, becomes a dangerous illusion. People work themselves into burnout chasing something that research already told us doesn't exist. The middle class drowns in debt from mortgages, student loans, credit cards, all in pursuit of a lifestyle that's supposed to equal fulfillment. And the statistics don't lie. Surveys show over 70% of Americans report regular stress about money. If the dream was designed to deliver peace, why does it leave so many exhausted and anxious? The truth is, money can buy comfort. It can buy options, but it cannot buy meaning. It's like trying to quench your thirst with ocean water. For a second, it feels like it works, but the more you drink, the worse it gets. Real joy comes from how you use what you have, not how much you stack. Psychologists say the key is separating material upgrades from emotional investments. When you buy things, the thrill is short-lived. When you invest in experiences, relationships, or purpose, the glow lasts. Picture this. One person drops 10 grand on a luxury watch. Another spends that same 10 grand taking their family on a once-in-a-lifetime trip. 10 years later, which one is still fueling joy? The watch will be scratched, outdated, maybe forgotten in a drawer. The trip will be alive in stories, photos, and family memories that still spark warmth. Studies confirm this. Spending money on experiences generates more lasting happiness than spending on possessions. Why? Because experiences become part of your identity. You don't just own them, you live them. So the paradox is clear. John Paul Getty, with his art collections and castles, couldn't find peace. Elon Musk, with rockets and billions, admits to emptiness. Ordinary Americans chase the dream, hit the milestones, and still lie awake restless. The science says happiness stops growing once you cross a modest income line. The culture says keep running anyway. And the result is a nation obsessed with chasing what money promises but can never fully deliver. The real question is this: if money isn't the answer, why are we still so addicted to the chase? Think about what it means to stand at the very top of the mountain. Everyone below is looking up at you, assuming you've made it, assuming your view must be breathtaking. But what if, once you get there, the air feels thin and the silence is unbearable? That's what life looks like for many billionaires. They've climbed higher than anyone else, only to realize the summit isn't what they imagined. Take Elon Musk again. To the outside world, he's a living symbol of success. Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink. The man literally aims for Mars. Yet in interviews, Musk has admitted to crashing waves of loneliness. Nights where he can't sleep, nights filled with pain. He said that sometimes he feels more like an engine than a person. That doesn't sound like the dream. It sounds like the cost of chasing it. And he's not alone. Tech moguls, hedge fund managers, celebrities, they reach the apex and find themselves battling emptiness. Robin Williams, one of the most beloved entertainers in American history, once said, "I used to think the worst thing in life was to end up all alone. It's not. The worst thing in life is end up with people that make you feel alone." He had fame, fortune, fans across the globe. Yet behind the curtain, he wrestled with darkness that money and success couldn't touch. This is the paradox of wealth at the top. The higher you rise, the thinner the oxygen. The more you have, the harder it is to trust. People want your time, your influence, your checkbook. Friends become suspects. Relationships become negotiations. Billionaires live behind gates and bodyguards, isolated by the very wealth that was supposed to set them free. And science explains why. The more we climb the financial ladder, the more we recalibrate our expectations. A bigger house just makes us crave an even bigger one. A seven-figure salary makes the eight-figure earners our new benchmark. Psychologists call this the relative income effect. We don't measure joy by what we actually have, but by how we stack up against the next person. So even at the peak, billionaires look sideways and upward, and the comparison game never ends. Daniel Kahneman and Angus Deaton's research hit this nail on the head. Remember their study? They found that beyond $75,000 a year, extra income doesn't significantly improve daily emotional well-being. But they also uncovered something deeper. Life evaluation, the way people think about the big picture of their life, does rise with income, at least on paper. Richer people say their lives are better, but when you drill down into their day-to-day moods, their stress, their joy, their peace, money doesn't help. They're still just as vulnerable to sadness, boredom, frustration. In other words, being richer might make you think you're happier, but it doesn't actually make you feel happier. That gap between what we think should make us happy and what actually does is the engine of dissatisfaction. Americans are raised on the American dream, this idea that wealth equals happiness. So when people finally achieve it and discover the emptiness, it feels like betrayal. No wonder anxiety and depression rates are climbing. No wonder antidepressant prescriptions have skyrocketed over the last 2 decades. People reached the so-called promised land and found it barren. Middle-class Americans feel this too. You don't have to be a billionaire to experience the paradox. The constant pressure to upgrade is everywhere. A study from the American Psychological Association showed that 72% of Americans feel stressed about money on a regular basis. It doesn't matter whether they're barely scraping by or doing reasonably well. The stress is baked in. Why? Because the system trains people to believe they're always behind. You could have a stable income, a roof over your head, food in the fridge, and still feel like you're failing because your Instagram feed shows friends with bigger homes, nicer vacations, better lives. The comparison trap is universal, and that trap is ruthless. In fact, researchers from Harvard ran a survey with a brutal question. Would you rather earn $50,000 a year while everyone else earns $25,000, or earn $100,000 while everyone else earns $200,000? The majority chose the first option. They'd rather make less, as long as they're ahead of others. Think about that. It proves happiness isn't about absolute wealth. It's about relative status. And that's why billionaires still feel the void. No matter how much they have, there's always someone with more. Let's go back to Elon Musk for a second. He's openly admitted that he struggles with the constant barrage of criticism, pressure, and sleepless nights. And here's the twist. Even though he has resources to buy peace, vacations, retreats, therapy, comfort, he rarely uses them. He pushes himself harder instead. Because the culture of success in America glorifies burnout. It's not enough to win. You have to keep winning bigger and faster. The American dream never says enough. It only whispers, more. This obsession has a cost. Wealthy individuals often show higher rates of substance abuse, depression, and broken relationships than average earners. The media rarely shows it, but behind the glossy headlines, there's a trail of loneliness and mental health struggles. Howard Hughes, once one of the richest men alive, spiraled into isolation, locking himself in hotel rooms, terrified of germs, consumed by paranoia. Billionaire by numbers, but prisoner by reality. So what do we do with this knowledge? If even the richest can't find joy in wealth, what hope does the average person have? The answer lies in redefining value. Money can create comfort, but it can't create connection. Money can buy things, but not meaning. What fills the void isn't the size of your bank account. It's the strength of your relationships, the sense of purpose in your days, the gratitude for what you already have. Gratitude is more powerful than it sounds. Studies show that regularly practicing gratitude, writing down things you're thankful for, expressing appreciation to others, literally rewires the brain. It shifts attention away from what's missing and onto what's already good. And unlike the fleeting thrill of buying something new, gratitude builds a lasting baseline of contentment. That's why people with modest incomes often report being happier than those with wealth far beyond their needs. They're not blind to their limits. They're attuned to their blessings. So here's the paradox, stripped to its bones. Billionaires at the peak still feel poor, not because of what they lack in their bank account, but because of what they lack in their hearts. The American dream teaches us to chase more, but the human spirit craves enough. And until we learn that difference, we'll keep sprinting on the hamster wheel, waiting for joy to arrive, while it's been sitting quietly in the corner all along. Picture this. The curtains are drawn shut, the lights are dim, and in the middle of a luxury hotel suite sits one of the richest men in the world, unshaven, unkempt, and terrified of the outside world. Howard Hughes, aviation pioneer, film producer, billionaire tycoon. Once a man who commanded the skies and Hollywood alike. By the end of his life, he wasn't flying planes or directing blockbusters. He was locked inside his own prison, consumed by paranoia, terrified of germs, hoarding tissues, and living in darkness. He had more money than entire cities, yet he couldn't buy the one thing he desperately wanted, peace of mind. Howard Hughes is the extreme version of what psychologists call relative deprivation. No matter how high we climb, if our sense of worth depends on what we have compared to others, happiness remains out of reach. Hughes had jets, hotels, movie studios, and power, but he was still measuring himself against giants in business and politics, still chasing something beyond his grasp. And when your self-worth rides on comparisons, there's no finish line. There's always someone richer, more powerful, more admired. This is the core of the happiness paradox. It's not about what you have, it's about how you perceive it. Relative wealth, where we rank in the pecking order, often dictates how happy we feel more than absolute wealth. You can be making $100,000 a year and feel miserable if everyone around you is making 200. Or you can be making 50 grand and feel like a king if your circle earns less. It's not logical, but it's how our brains work. Social media has supercharged this trap. Before, comparisons happened in your neighborhood, your workplace, your circle of friends. Now, you compare yourself to millions of strangers every time you open an app. Your friend posts about their honeymoon in Bali. Someone else shows off a new car. A celebrity casually displays a mansion. Suddenly, your normal life feels inadequate. It's no longer enough to have a roof over your head and food on the table. You're bombarded with images of what you don't have, 24/7. It's like living inside a constant reminder that you're behind. And here's the kicker. Even billionaires feel this. That's why they chase super yachts, private islands, space travel. It's not about need. It's about staying ahead in the endless comparison game. Once you have more money than you could ever spend, the only currency left is status. And status is fragile. Someone always builds a bigger yacht, launches a flashier project, or tops the Forbes list. Hughes built some of the largest airplanes of his time, but when others outpaced him, he spiraled deeper into obsession and paranoia. Scientists call this the treadmill effect. No matter how fast you run, you stay in the same place emotionally. Every achievement sets a new baseline, and then the goalpost moves further. Think about your own life. Remember the excitement of your first car, your first decent paycheck, your first apartment? Over time, those things became normal. What once thrilled you now barely registers. The same happens with billionaires. Only their cars are Lamborghinis, their apartments are penthouses, their thrills are rocket launches. But the treadmill doesn't care about scale. It always resets. One fascinating study looked at Olympic medalists. You'd think the happiest would be the silver medalists. They're second best in the world. But researchers found that bronze medalists were often happier. Why? Because silver medalists compared themselves to gold and felt like failures. Bronze medalists compared themselves to fourth place and felt lucky. The reality was the same. Both had extraordinary achievements. But perception, the comparison lens, dictated happiness. The same applies to wealth. It's not about your absolute position. It's about who you choose to compare yourself to. The American dream feeds this cycle. It tells us, work harder, earn more, climb higher, and you'll finally be fulfilled. But it never teaches us to step off the treadmill. It never says, enough. It only whispers, keep going. And so we compare, we upgrade, we hustle, and still feel unsatisfied. Because comparison is a bottomless pit. You can throw billions into it, and it will never fill. Howard Hughes had the money to design the largest aircraft in history, the infamous Spruce Goose. It was a marvel of engineering, yet he flew it only once. Why? Because the achievement didn't bring the satisfaction he expected. It became just another trophy on the shelf, another fleeting high. So he kept pushing, chasing the next obsession, while his personal life crumbled. His story isn't just a cautionary tale about mental illness. It's a mirror reflecting how wealth without meaning turns into emptiness. And the science agrees. Researchers studying life satisfaction find that people who define their success by relative wealth are less happy, more anxious, and more prone to depression than those who measure by internal standards, like personal growth, relationships, or purpose. When your scoreboard is external, you're at the mercy of endless comparisons. When your scoreboard is internal, you have control. Social media makes this harder than ever. Studies show heavy users of platforms like Instagram and TikTok report lower self-esteem and higher anxiety. Why? Because these platforms are highlight reels. You see everyone else's best 10% and compare it to your own messy 100%. And the wealthiest influencers? They curate lives that even they don't live consistently. It's theater designed to trigger envy. And it works. People chase that image, buy more, work more, hustle harder, thinking they're closing the gap. But the gap is an illusion. It expands faster than you can fill it. So what's the way out? It starts with changing the game. Instead of comparing sideways, compare backwards. Look at where you were 5 years ago. Look at the struggles you overcame, the progress you've made. That's a comparison you can win because it's with yourself. Psychologists recommend this as a practical tool. Journal your growth. Reflect on personal milestones. Remind yourself of the hurdles you've cleared. It breaks the cycle of external comparison and roots your happiness in your own journey. And here's another secret. Experiences anchor us in joy, while possessions fade. Studies consistently show that people who spend on experiences, travel, concerts, learning new skills, report greater and longer-lasting happiness than those who spend on material goods. Experiences create stories, memories, connections. They become part of who you are. Possessions, no matter how shiny, eventually gather dust. That's why billionaires who redirect wealth into meaningful projects often find more peace. Chuck Feeney, the billionaire co-founder of duty-free shoppers, quietly gave away his entire fortune, over $8 billion, to charity. He lived in a modest apartment, wore a cheap watch, flew coach. And in interviews, he radiated joy, because he wasn't chasing status. He was investing in meaning. He stepped off the treadmill. Howard Hughes and Chuck Feeney lived opposite endings. Hughes died alone, paranoid, broken, surrounded by fortune but starved of happiness. Feeney gave it all away and lived out his days with purpose. Both were billionaires. One proved that money without meaning is misery. The other proved that money with meaning can bring peace. So here's the paradox. Once again, wealth magnifies what's already there. If you're trapped in comparison, wealth will make the trap deeper. If you're grounded in gratitude and purpose, wealth can be a tool for freedom. The difference isn't the number in the bank account. The difference is perspective. And that leaves us with a haunting question. In a culture obsessed with chasing more, how do we teach ourselves to embrace enough? Imagine standing in a theme park built just for you. Ferris wheels, roller coasters, candy stands, a zoo, arcade games, everything you could ever dream of as a child. And imagine that this isn't just a weekend escape. This is your home. That was Neverland Ranch, Michael Jackson's private kingdom. He spent hundreds of millions of dollars creating a playground that could erase his loneliness. He filled it with animals, rides, movie theaters, endless shopping sprees. To the outside world, it looked like the definition of joy. But inside, Michael Jackson spoke openly about how isolated he felt, how the money and the fantasy world didn't silence the emptiness in his heart. He was proof that you can buy distractions, but you cannot buy peace. This is where the paradox cuts sharpest. When money is used as medicine for the soul, it never heals, it only numbs. Psychologists call this the consumption trap. You buy something because you feel low, it gives you a short dopamine hit, and then it fades. So you buy again, and again, until consumption becomes a cycle of self-medication. That's why retail therapy feels good in the moment, but doesn't last. You're not treating the root of the problem, you're just masking it. Science has been clear on this for decades. Material purchases deliver a quick shot of pleasure, but experiences create deeper, longer-lasting happiness. Why? Because possessions decay. They get scratched, outdated, or forgotten. The thrill of a new phone lasts maybe a week before it becomes another object in your pocket. But experiences weave into your identity. A trip you took 10 years ago still brings warmth when you think about it. A concert you went to with friends still makes you smile. A simple family dinner can become a cherished memory that outlives any purchase. Experiences live in stories, not shelves. And Americans are drowning in shelves. Consumer culture is the backbone of the American economy. The message is everywhere. Buy more, upgrade, spend your way to happiness. Advertisements are engineered to make you feel inadequate until you purchase the solution. Bigger TV, newer car, designer clothes. It's no accident that malls were once called temples of consumption. People walked in not just to shop, but to feel alive, to escape their emptiness for a moment. But what happens after the credit card bill arrives? The rush turns into regret, the emptiness returns, and the cycle restarts. Michael Jackson's story is the most extreme version of this. He could buy anything. He bought amusement parks, entire wardrobes of glittering clothes, the most expensive art, even the bones of the so-called Elephant Man. But none of it fixed the void inside. His wealth only amplified his loneliness. The more he tried to cover the wound with things, the deeper it became. And his life became a tragic example of what happens when we confuse consumption with connection. The science goes deeper. A landmark study by researchers Leif Van Boven and Thomas Gilovich compared people who spent money on material goods versus experiences. Over and over, those who chose experiences reported higher levels of satisfaction, not just at the time of the purchase, but years later. Experiences also strengthen relationships. When you share a trip, a concert, even a simple outing, you bond with the people around you. Possessions, by contrast, often isolate. They're yours alone, And sometimes they even breed envy instead of connection. Think about it in your own life. Maybe you bought something expensive, a gadget, a piece of clothing, a piece of furniture. At first, it felt amazing, but months later, it's just there. Now think about the last time you traveled somewhere, laughed uncontrollably with friends, or tried something new. That memory probably still lights you up. That's the difference. One fades, the other endures. And yet, America's obsession with consumption is stronger than ever. Social media feeds the fire. Influencers flaunt luxury hauls, unbox designer items, and broadcast lifestyles designed to trigger envy. People watch, compare, and rush to spend, hoping to feel a fraction of the happiness promised by the screen. But happiness doesn't come in a shipping box. It doesn't arrive with a brand logo. That's the cruel joke of consumerism. It promises fulfillment and delivers only hunger. Meanwhile, debt explodes. Credit card debt in the U.S. has hit record highs, with millions living paycheck to paycheck while still spending on non-essentials. Why? Because people are chasing a feeling. They're not buying things. They're buying the hope that the emptiness will stop. But it doesn't. The American dream has been repackaged into the American shopping spree, and the result is stress, anxiety, and burnout. Michael Jackson's Neverland wasn't unique. It was just bigger, more extravagant. But millions of Americans do the same thing on a smaller scale. They buy the latest phone, even if the old one works fine. They upgrade cars before the lease is over. They fill closets with clothes that barely get worn. And they still wonder why life feels empty. Because consumption can't touch the parts of us that crave meaning. The solution isn't to demonize money or possessions. It's to recognize their limits. Money can buy comfort. It can buy security. It can buy opportunities. But once those basics are covered, the pursuit of more things becomes diminishing returns. At best, it gives a momentary thrill. At worst, it becomes a distraction from the real work of building joy. And here's where the paradox twists again. When you use money to buy experiences, relationships, or growth, it actually does increase happiness. That same dollar, spent differently, can transform from a fleeting buzz into lasting fulfillment. A cooking class with a friend, a road trip with your kids, a donation to a cause that matters to you. These are not just transactions, they're investments in your emotional life. Imagine two people. One spends $5,000 on a luxury handbag. The other spends $5,000 on a trip across the country with loved ones. 10 years later, the handbag will likely be out of style, tucked away, or long gone. But the trip, the photos, the stories, the shared moments, they'll still be alive. The second person didn't just buy a trip. They bought memories that continue to pay dividends in joy. And this is what the American dream forgot to teach. It told us that money equals happiness, but it never taught us how to spend it wisely. It never said, prioritize experiences, connection, purpose. Instead, it said, climb higher, buy bigger, show the world you've made it. That message is why so many Americans wake up every day with a house full of things, but a heart full of emptiness. Michael Jackson's story haunts because it's exaggerated truth. He had Neverland, and still he felt lonely. But in a way, Neverland exists everywhere, in suburban homes, in shopping malls, in Amazon carts. It's the fantasy that things will save us. And it's always a lie. So here's the insight. Joy doesn't come from stacking possessions. It comes from stacking moments. It comes from laughter at a dinner table, from adventures that stretch your perspective, from bonds that make you feel less alone. That's the real wealth, the kind that money can only unlock if you spend it with wisdom. And if you need proof, just look at the emptiness of Neverland. Look at the hollow echo inside a palace of endless toys. Then ask yourself, do you want to build a castle of things or a life of meaning? Picture the face of Anthony Bourdain. Charismatic, adventurous, a man who traveled the world tasting food, meeting people, telling stories that connected cultures. From the outside, his life looked like pure freedom, good money, global fame, doing what he loved every day. Millions envied him. And then, in 2018, the news hit. Bourdain had taken his own life in a hotel room in France. The world was stunned. How could someone who had everything, the career, the adventures, the recognition, feel so empty inside? This is the dark side of success that people rarely talk about. On the surface, success shines like gold. But often, behind closed doors, it weighs heavy like lead. Wealth and achievement can amplify pressure, loneliness, and anxiety instead of curing them. The paradox deepens. The higher you rise, the darker the shadows can become. Psychologists call it the paradox of choice. In simple terms, the more options we have, the less satisfied we feel. Think about standing in front of a supermarket aisle with 50 brands of cereal. Instead of feeling free, you feel overwhelmed. And even when you pick one, you second guess. Maybe the other was better. Now magnify that by 1,000. Wealth gives you infinite options: where to live, what to buy, who to date, what to do with your time. And instead of feeling liberated, people often feel trapped by indecision, haunted by the fear of missing out. Too many choices can create anxiety, not joy. Barry Schwartz, who studied this paradox, found that people with more choices often experience more regret, more dissatisfaction, and less happiness. Billionaires live in a world of endless choices. But that freedom comes with a cost: the inability to feel content with any single decision. It's like sitting at a banquet with 100 dishes, but never enjoying the one in front of you, because you're wondering if another might taste better. And here's where depression creeps in. Success isolates. The more you achieve, the more people see you as a symbol, not a human. Friends become fans, relationships become complicated, and it's hard to know who genuinely cares for you versus who wants access to your influence. Bourdain was adored globally, yet he confessed to feeling lonely, restless, and unmoored. The world loved his image, but the man behind it still struggled with his own demons. Money also amplifies pressure. If you're broke, people don't expect you to be happy. But if you're rich and unhappy, society looks at you with disbelief. How could you possibly be sad? You have everything. That stigma makes it even harder to seek help. So people at the top often suffer in silence, ashamed of their own pain. Wealth doesn't shield you from depression. It can make it harder to admit. Let's zoom out to America as a whole. The culture of success is relentless. Hustle harder. Work longer. Grind now, shine later. The American dream glorifies achievement, but doesn't prepare people for what happens when they actually achieve it. No one teaches how to handle the emptiness that follows. That's why rates of anxiety and depression keep climbing, even as living standards rise. According to the CDC, use of antidepressants in the U.S. has increased by over 60% in the last 2 decades. More money, more comfort, more stuff. Yet more people feel hollow. And stress isn't confined to billionaires. The middle class faces its own nightmare. Debt, job insecurity, rising costs of living. These pressures fuel chronic anxiety. But even those who escape financial struggle often find themselves unsatisfied. They've ticked the boxes: the house, the car, the career. But the joy they expected never arrives. Because success, without meaning, is just another cage. Here's another angle: loneliness. Studies show loneliness has the same impact on health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Wealth and success often magnify it. The more you have, the harder it is to trust. Billionaires live behind gates and walls, cut off from normal community life. Celebrities can't walk down the street without cameras. Even the moderately wealthy may find themselves drifting from old friends, consumed by careers that demand everything. And loneliness doesn't care about your bank account. It corrodes from the inside. The paradox of choice plays out here too. With infinite paths available, people struggle to commit. Why settle with one partner when there might be someone better? Why stay in one career when you could reinvent yourself endlessly? This constant searching leaves people restless, never rooted. And rootlessness breeds emptiness. Think about the modern workplace. Technology promised freedom, work from anywhere, flexible schedules, endless opportunities. Instead, it created a culture of always being on. Americans work longer hours than almost any other developed nation. Success has become synonymous with burnout. And burnout doesn't discriminate. It hits CEOs and baristas alike. The message is the same. Do more, be more, earn more. But no one asks, at what cost? And here's the tragic irony. The pursuit of success often destroys the very things that bring happiness. Relationships are neglected. Health is sacrificed. Time disappears. People chase wealth to secure freedom, but the chase enslaves them. Anthony Bourdain once said, "Your body is not a temple. It's an amusement park. Enjoy the ride." But behind the bravado was a man who struggled to enjoy the ride himself. His story reminds us that adventure, money, fame, they can't protect you from inner storms. So what's the way out? Psychologists suggest the answer isn't more, but less. Simplicity, boundaries, learning to embrace limits. The paradox of choice loses its power when you narrow the field. When you decide what truly matters and cut the rest. People who simplify, who focus on relationships, purpose, and gratitude, report higher levels of well-being than those who spread themselves thin across endless options. Minimalism isn't just about decluttering closets. It's about decluttering life. It's about saying no to the excess that weighs you down. It's about choosing depth over breadth. A few close friends instead of 1,000 followers. A meaningful career instead of endless job hopping. A focus on health and joy instead of constant hustle. In other words, it's about redefining success. And here's where the American dream needs rewriting. It's not wrong to want comfort or to celebrate achievement. But the idea that success equals happiness is broken. True success isn't about accumulation. It's about alignment, living in line with your values, your purpose, your relationships. That's what fills the emptiness money can't touch. Think about people who downshifted, who walked away from six-figure jobs to live simpler lives, to spend time with family, to pursue passions. Many report being happier, not poorer, because they stopped chasing the mirage and started living with intention. Anthony Bourdain's life was extraordinary, and his death was tragic. It reminds us that success can mask suffering, that smiles on TV don't always reflect peace within. But it also forces us to ask, what are we chasing and why? If success isn't the cure, maybe it's time to rethink the disease. Because in the end, the dark side of success isn't about failure. It's about forgetting what really matters while running after what doesn't. Picture a man who quietly gave away $8 billion. Not to his kids, not to luxury, not to yachts or mansions. He gave it to schools, hospitals, human rights campaigns, health research. When he was done, he had nothing left. No private jets, no art collections, no hidden accounts. Just a modest apartment, a simple life, and a cheap watch on his wrist. His name was Chuck Feeney, and he spent his final years living more happily than many billionaires who hoarded their wealth. While others fought to climb Forbes' list, Feeney's joy came from stepping off it. He proved that money, when used with meaning, can be freedom, not a cage. That's the counterpoint to every tragic story of wealth we've walked through. John Paul Getty, Howard Hughes, Michael Jackson, even Elon Musk in his loneliest moments. Wealth without meaning left them restless. Chuck Feeney's story flips the script. Because he didn't chase money for status. He used it as a tool to amplify values that already made him feel alive. And that's where the secret lies. Positive psychology, the science of what makes life worth living, points to three pillars of happiness: relationships, meaning, and achievement. Relationships give us love, connection, belonging. Meaning gives us purpose, the sense that our life matters beyond ourselves. Achievement gives us pride and growth, but only when aligned with our values. Money can support all three, but only if we use it intentionally. Without that alignment, money becomes noise. With it, money becomes music. So what does this mean for us, ordinary people trying to survive in a culture obsessed with more? It means we don't have to reject money, but we have to stop worshiping it. Money can buy time with loved ones. It can buy opportunities to learn, to explore, to give. It can buy freedom from the stress of bills and debt. But beyond that, the real work begins. Because happiness doesn't live in your paycheck. It lives in your choices. This is why new movements are reshaping the American dream. Minimalism tells us, less stuff, more life. FIRE, financial independence, retire early, tells us, live below your means, save aggressively, buy back your time. Don't wait until 65 to enjoy life. These movements resonate because people are waking up. They're tired of running on the hamster wheel. They're tired of drowning in debt for things they don't need, trying to impress people they don't even like. They're realizing that freedom isn't about having everything. It's about needing less. And the science backs it up. Studies on gratitude, for example, show that people who practice daily gratitude, writing down things they're thankful for, expressing appreciation to loved ones, report higher levels of happiness, better sleep, less stress. Gratitude flips the brain's script from what's missing to what's already good. It's the opposite of consumer culture. It teaches us to savor, not chase. Another cornerstone is balance. Americans are taught to glorify hustle, work more, sleep less, grind harder. But research on well-being shows that balance matters far more. Time off, hobbies, connection, leisure, these aren't luxuries. They're essentials for mental health. Countries with shorter work weeks and stronger social safety nets consistently rank higher in happiness than the U.S., despite lower average incomes. Why? Because people there value life, not just labor. Then there's the power of giving. Neuroscience shows that acts of generosity activate the brain's reward centers. Giving literally lights us up more than receiving. Chuck Feeney knew this. Billionaires like Warren Buffett and Bill Gates eventually admitted it too, pledging most of their wealth to philanthropy. But giving isn't reserved for billionaires. Small acts, helping a neighbor, donating time, supporting a cause, can ripple joy into your own life as much as into others. So where does that leave us, standing in the paradox? Here's the truth. Money is a tool, not a destination. Use it to build experiences, to nurture relationships, to support your health and passions. But never mistake it for happiness itself. Because happiness isn't something you can buy. It's something you build. Think about the life you want to look back on. Do you want shelves full of things or memories full of love? Do you want endless work weeks chasing numbers or mornings of peace and nights of laughter? The American dream told us to chase the house, the car, the promotion. But maybe the real dream is much simpler. To live aligned with your values, surrounded by people who matter, free from the illusion that more is the answer. The stories of the rich and broken remind us of the trap. The story of Chuck Feeney reminds us of the way out. The science of happiness gives us the tools: gratitude, simplicity, connection, meaning, and the rest is up to us. Because in the end, the paradox of happiness isn't that money fails. It's that we keep asking it to do a job it was never meant to do. Money can buy freedom, but it can't buy joy. Joy comes from love, from purpose, from enough. And enough is the most radical word in a culture built on more. So maybe the final question isn't, can money buy happiness? We already know the answer. The real question is, will we keep running after the illusion? Or will we finally stop, breathe, and choose a different dream?